and welcome to When IT Hits the Fan, brought to you by Rhyno Healthcare Services. We are here to discuss the wide world of healthcare IT and how to bring better product and performance from payer, provider to patient. Today we have Aubrey Ford with us. Hello. He is in Georgia. I am in very dreary New Jersey. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a little bit rainy out, but it's going to be a nice day,
I heard that you were up all night with an outage, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about, or at least in broad strokes.
right? Yeah, they called me at 11 o'clock last night Eastern time, and I got on the bridge, and we had about 25 people on there working on all various applications and restoring service, and gratefully I can say we had no major issues. All of our systems failed over as designed. It was very nice.
Isn't that the best? You have to design the system to fail in order to pick it back up, get all the blocks back all together. Um,
Exactly.
so why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your position is, what your corner of the sky is in the wide world? Yeah.
Sure. My name is Aubrey Ford, as you said. I work in IT with a specific specialty within contact centers. So my area of expertise is all of the systems and platforms that a contact center would use: call recording, workforce management, ACD, IVR, et cetera. Pretty much everything except for the CRM tool. But everything, I mean, I literally have about 37 applications that make up the platform that I support. And I
Mhm.
have two different platforms that I support. One is a cloud-based platform. Technically, it's a hybrid cloud. And the other one is 100% on-prem that we built about 10, 11 years ago.
Are you guys looking to do any migration, or are we happy where things are between public and private?
Well, so we actually separated the two platforms based on their purpose. So our member facing is the more robust on-prem system that we built and have been customizing over the last decade. The hybrid cloud platform is more for the employee facing contact centers. And so we kind of differentiate based on purpose.
Mhm.
The hybrid contact center was actually stood up last year, and we migrated the internal business units onto that platform, last year and continuing into this year.
How did that go? I've heard many a migration story.
It was actually very good. Obviously, with any new platform, there's a learning curve, but most of the issues we had are related to the learning curve, not just on the user side, but on the IT side. There is a bit of getting used to. If you're not used to a cloud platform, there are certain services that you purchase as a part of that you don't really have the control that you're used to having when it's in your own data center. And so it takes a little bit of a learning curve for that as well.
Most certainly. How were things when it came to having the business side of things and the IT hands on keyboard side of things, combining into one vision? How did that go?
It went well. We actually, because the two platforms are two different technology sets, meaning it's not the same technology underlying either one, we had to staff up a little bit in terms of skill sets.
Yeah.
So we've done that. We have a managed service partner that I won't name or anything, but they helped us develop, integrate it into our existing platforms, and they're also supporting us.
Excellent. All right. So what we are here on this podcast, when IT hits the fan, we are talking about challenges. We are talking about things that we as a sector need to overcome. But let's look backwards in time for just a little while. I want to ask you, what was one of the biggest challenges that you and your team at any job along the way have faced, whether it be one massive, destructive, a hurricane hit, or just 3 years of trying to get an application integrated, Um,
Uh, so, so I would say, trying to keep it semi-recent, right? Because I'm going to stay away from 9/11 because that was quite a long time ago and it was a different world. But the pandemic is probably the most recent major event that IT shops had to pivot very quickly to a new paradigm, right? Especially in the contact center space. Because if you think about contact centers, population density matters. If I can get 100 agents into 100 square feet, that's better than 50 agents in 100 square feet. But when in times of a pandemic, that's very concerning. You don't want that population density. And so we had to very rapidly shift about 7,000 call center agents from inside the call center to go home and still be efficient and work efficiently. And that was a huge, huge learning. Um, but we did it in about 3 to 4 months. And
Excellent.
that was we were shocked. We thought, oh God, this is going to be a lot of work. It's going to take us months. It's going to be a real big pain. But all the different IT organizations came together. And I hate to use the word synergy, but that's the best word that applies. I mean,
No, it was the house was on fire. Everybody had to lend a
exactly.
hand.
And so it was, if everybody was kind of a whatever you need, I'm here for you. I got you. Let's get it done. In 3 months, we sent over 7,000 agents to go work from home.
I can only imagine what that is from even just a hardware standpoint, a training standpoint. Also, just the scalability of the actual applications themselves, whether it be patients calling in, customers dealing with this, the actual call center workers communicating. What was scaling like, be it hardware or software?
The scaling was actually okay. The one area where we did have to scale up very quickly was in video visits. So clinical video visits.
Hmm.
I'm don't quote me on numbers here. I'm just giving you ballparks. If we were doing 1,000 video visits a day, we were up to about 30 to 40,000 a day in 4 or 5 months. I mean, it was a big hockey stick upswing, and the ability for the company and for our vendors and for everybody to scale that fast was just amazing.
If you had to estimate the amount of people when they called all hands on deck,
Mhm.
are we talking a couple hundred? I've seen up to 1,000. I've seen 12. How many people were working together in the synergy to just pull the rope?
So I can tell you from my perspective, there was at least 500 people that I'm aware of that I either interacted with. Let's say I interacted with you, but I know your entire team is engaged, and I know there's 10 people on your team. So that's how I'm extrapolating that number from. I'm
Absolutely.
sure I'm sure it was bigger, but I'm giving you my own, within my view.
Absolutely. And how did obviously everybody together, the team, you were together in spirit, but we're talking literally PMO. How did everything stay organized? What was the structure like in the
So,
business?
yeah, so we had daily stand-ups, 1 hour every morning and 1 hour at the end of every day. And
Okay.
the goal there was to be, what do we need to get done today? And at the end of the day, what did we accomplish and what do we need to put on, the top of the agenda for the next day? And that was every day, 7 days a week for about 2 months.
Excellent. Excellent. And the job got done from what I'm hearing.
It was some long days and some long weeks, but it got done. And from my perspective, working in IT, working for healthcare, working in the contact center, you're talking, everybody's familiar with 1-800 Ask a Nurse, right? So in my world, people think, oh, call center, not a big deal. Well, these are clinicians. These are doctors and nurses providing care. So every single phone call, every single chat, every single video visit matters. You can't know if this one call is somebody with heart palpitations who needs to talk to somebody, or if they're just, if it's nothing. You just don't know. So you have to treat everyone like it's an emergency.
Absolutely. Um, And would you say that the company that you're at, and we don't name names, we do not kiss and tell here on this podcast, but we're in 2024 now. Obviously, nothing will ever go back to March 9th, 2020.
Right.
Um, but would you say that you guys are going on to the other side? Is it just a totally new horizon where if you called yourself up in 2019, you wouldn't recognize it? Um,
Oh, it's definitely different than say 2019. But one thing I tell people is we did in about 6 to 8 months what was already on the agenda for the next 2 to 3 years, right? So we were headed in these directions, being able to work remote and doing
yeah.
video visits and all of these other things. We just had to compress 3 years worth of pipeline into 6 months. But now that we're there, there's no going back.
No. How much of that would you say is technology itself moving forward as opposed to just the need of the pandemic?
The technology, we already had the technology there. And because we were already on that path, we had the foundations of what we wanted to build and how we wanted to build it. It was mostly for us around scalability. How do we scale it up super fast?
Hmm.
Because, and then as, probably a year and a half after, March 9th, 2020, then we started looking at efficiencies. Okay, how do how do we make this more efficient? The platform that we had foundationally, does that make sense moving forward at the scale that we're at now? Are there better options, right? So getting more into strategy and like, okay, we had to scale up fast, but now is this the right solution at this scale?
Hmm. I was doing a recording with another person who just had this wonderful insight into that IT people, we tend to like to solve puzzles. We like to go on quests. We like to get all the little side achievements. We're very good at how. Sometimes we can miss the why. And if everybody isn't together on understanding why something is happening, things quickly go in every different direction, right? Um, uh, what do you see coming down the pike? Coming forward, either technologically or need based in healthcare sector itself.
So I think, and this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, I think generative AI, it's more than a
Let's talk
buzzword,
about it.
right? It's more than a buzzword.
Yep,
It's
you let the
here.
genie out of the bottle. I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
it's here. And I think for a lot of people and a lot of companies, they're trying to understand how do I garner value from that, right? Where do I implement it so that I'm getting the biggest bang for my buck, that I'm not biting off more than I can chew, or what have you. In the healthcare space, which is where I've been for the last 20 years or so, it's mostly around member interaction. So, generative AI, chatbots, and
Hmm.
search engines, and the idea that you can start asking questions through an AI bot prior to speaking with a clinician, and then get a lot of that basic, like, how old are you, what's your weight, all those things. And if the patient has questions,
Hmm.
you can source some of that. The key there, the trick is, you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about personal identifiable information, personal
Yeah.
health information, et cetera. How do you balance the security around generative AI? That's the part I think is going to be a struggle in healthcare.
Hmm.
It's one thing to say, oh, I have this intelligence that can scour the web and provide you answers and all of that, but then you have to make sure that that answer isn't going to put you in legal trouble.
Yes,
And so
on both
that's a trick.
sides.
Yes,
One, it needs to give correct answers because we can't afford to miss. And the other thing is that a generative AI, what is it? It is basically a grand database that is finding the mathematical average of text information. It's finding the average of
correct.
information, so that it can guess what is probably the right thing to do. Um,
Well, and the other thing with generative AI is it's self-learning,
yes,
right?
and
So,
it's taking your information to learn more.
well, not just
But
yours, but everyone. And so if healthcare providers and other organizations are able to securely share with each other, right,
yes,
information, that's going to increase the speed at which generative AI becomes more accurate and more trustworthy.
yep. Um, what do you think about the idea of who owns that information?
Great question. Because here I am talking about sharing. How do you share information that you own without giving away the farm, so to speak? I'm kind of, I'm in IT, so I'm kind of a purist. It's like data is data. The key is, can you anonymize it, right? That's the key. I can share all of my data with you as long as you don't know which member I'm talking about, right? And some company, anonymizing data takes effort. You really have to create a completely separate data, like a completely different data source that's already anonymized. So you have to basically take the infrastructure and the databases and everything you have that holds all of your information and duplicate it in an anonymous way. That's a lot of extra infrastructure, and that's a lot of money and a lot of time. And then you've got to agree on standards and how you're going to share with everybody else. It's going to take a little bit of effort.
Absolutely, and it has to come down to, I hope, and who am I? I'm no one, but I hope that businesses don't try to make a buck off of sharing their anonymized member information. If they, let's say they're larger and they can sell all of California, or at least a third of California, because otherwise we get into antitrust laws. But they can sell the information of 33% of California and the largest diabetic population there. I hope, and we know what the world is, but I really hope it becomes more scientific in base than capitalistic, I'll say it that way. That this is a beautiful tool that can help so many people.
Agreed. I read an article not too long ago talking about, um, we have all this data for detecting cancers, right? But every health organization has their own data on the success rate and what tools they're using and such. But there isn't a lot of sharing because of the PHI and HIPAA and all of those things. So if
As
we can
well as
find a way to,
patents.
right, as well as patents, so a lot of people have custom apps they've built that they don't want to talk about. And I don't want to get political here at all, but I completely agree with you. It has for the purposes of healthcare, anonymize the data, put it into a common repository that everybody can access, right? The goal there is for better health outcomes, all right?
Absolutely. I'm completely with you when it comes to I've read before about how if we just shared the information we have, say on vaccines, the amount of there in within 10 years between the AI and the information if people shared, we could have cancer vaccines. It just so
Potentially.
absolutely wild.
Well, and
But
that's a good dovetail, right? Connecting the generative AI with this data lake of anonymized data about health information, right? Not specific to you. We're talking, a 35-year-old man, you know, Caucasian, with this history,
of course,
you
no
know,
names.
right? Nothing like that. Just talking about the symptoms and the test results and his, A1C is this, this number, whatever, right? Having all of that in a place where a generative AI bot can leverage that and say, okay, based off of all of this information, this is what we think is right. Then you'll back that up with a person, right? Then you get a human being who injects the humanity into it, and is this the right thing, and go from there. But it could be a huge game changer.
And segueing into the dirty thing about AI, the thing that we cannot say because we just talked about the human aspect. Is it coming for our jobs? Is it coming through the windows, through the walls with torches in his hands?
I'm one of those believers. I'm an optimist. So my thought patterns is this, sort of. So there are certain jobs today that may get diminished because of generative AI as it gets better. However, the fact that a new tool and a new platform and a new whatever exists means new types of jobs. I've recently saw some job postings for people that know, the proper way to structure a question for AI, right? My son recently was visiting, and he really loves Chat GPT, and he's out there doing things, and I'm like, I'm old, so I'm used to going on to Google and typing, you know, uh, you know, where is this place,
Yeah,
or what's the average of blah blah blah, and he's like, no, you got to form the question this way. I'm like, oh, he's like, because if you form the question correctly, you get a much better answer.
absolutely.
And so those types of things, they're actually jobs, and I can't remember what the name of the job position was, but basically the job was writing good questions of AI, asking the right question to get the right answer.
I was having a different conversation, and I am completely agreeing with you. AI needs handlers.
Yes,
It is it's called artificial intelligence, but in the same way that 5G doesn't really exist, it's just faster 4G. We just called it 5G because
right.
4G
That's
plus didn't
it's
sound as
it's
cool.
branding.
Exactly. AI, artificial intelligence, it's not an intelligence. It
No,
is a large data lake that is structuring everything so that you can get to patterns as fast as humanly possible.
right. The whole idea of generative AI is the learning model, right? The large language learning models. That's where generative part comes in. We've had AI for a long time, but now it's able to learn from its own mistakes. But to your point, handlers, right? You not only need to have people writing the right questions to get the right answers, but then, like I mentioned before, you need somebody on the output, looking at the output to inject the humanity and inject the common sense into what the output is. So yes, there will be some jobs that AI may diminish, but it also creates new types of jobs.
Exactly. I think that it is a powerful tool. Something I compare it to in my head is the ability for an artist say if they have their iPad, if they have Procreate, they now can go into the Adobe, excuse me, not Adobe, but they can go into the color wheel and select any tint, any hue, any saturation, anything they want at a click. When before they needed to know how to mix paints, how to select more light, fast mediums versus the others. It's not, it is different, but it is a tool. It is moving us forward, at least in my eyes.
Well, and there was a time in that genre of art where the purists, I'm going back a long time, but the purists were like, well, you're taking all of the emotion out of the art because you're sitting in front of a computer now. Okay, well, I'm not an artist. I don't really have much of an opinion on that, but I don't think that we've suffered artistically from using computers and technology to create art.
I think that if you give humans a tool for long enough, art will come, health will come, so many
Yep,
beautiful things will come. Yes, also, is it a cursed dream? Yes, I have watched The Wind Rises from Studio Ghibli, but but so let's move forward, although we can always circle back to AI because it is
sure.
sort of the hot button issue of
It
the
is.
day. It is April 11th, 2024. Um, uh, but what do you see as the major changes? Yes, AI, issues, challenges. If someone is just entering the field, what are you warning them about? What are you telling them? Always do this, never do that, even though generalizations are dangerous. Um,
I mean, speak from the IT perspective, you have to have a lust for learning, right? So because technology moves fast. In today's world, a technology lifespan is 2 to 3 years quite often. And that's too fast for businesses. Businesses need, 5, 6, 10 years to really get the value out of the investment. But
yes.
technology moves faster. So if you want to stay relevant in the IT world, you have to constantly be educating. I tell the people that I work with, look, and I practice what I preach. I take a percentage of my bonus each year, and I use that to fund my next certification, my next training class, my next whatever. I realize not everybody gets bonuses, but you've got to dedicate the time and the effort. There's so much free resources out there now for
Hmm.
education. You don't have to pay to go to a class. The information is actually out there. You just have to dedicate the time and effort. And you have to have a lust for learning because if you ever stop learning what's new, you quickly find yourself behind the curve technology. I know probably about 15 years ago, and I started in the telecom space. There's a technology called SIP, Session Initiation Protocol. It's a type of communication for voice and video. Um, Maybe 15 years or so ago, it was just really starting to ramp up, and I was telling a lot of the other engineers who were older than me, "Hey, we got to learn this because it's coming." Voice used to be a separate wire. Like when you're sitting at your desk 15 years ago, you had two cables, one for your computer and one for your phone. Well, that's not that way anymore. Voice moved to be just another application on the network. And the older engineers 15 years ago that I was working with said, nope, nope, this is fine. I know what I know. It works fine. And within 3 years, they didn't know how to work on the technology they were being paid to work on. So you've got to stay current.
How do you think that businesses themselves can help their IT employees stay current, be it through training or any other initiatives?
So twofold. One, I think companies should always be offering training for the technologies that they're employing. So if I'm using, Teams, just to use a product name, um, you know, it's a fairly intuitive product, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't offer courses and things like that to help people take as much advantage of that as they can. Um, People, when they use an application, even when it's intuitive, are going to use those things they use day in and day out. They may not know there are other capabilities available to them because they don't use those as often. The other thing is you have to bake into your policies the idea that like I know some companies, they'll say, okay, you have so much PTO, you have to take some of that, right? They kind of there really is a push for work-life balance, and they do that through enforcing PTO and things like that. You have to take the same approach to training. I know in my organization, I tell my people, you have to do at least 16 hours of training per year. Like it's only 2 days, but it's required. I need you to make training and learning a priority.
Absolutely. Um, what would you say right now are the biggest thorns in your side? What is the danger? Where is the house fire?
Um, that's a good one. Um, Honestly, it's budgets. With the pandemic, you know, it was not good financially. You know, we're okay. I mean, the company's not in trouble or anything like that, but you have to tighten the belt post-pandemic. And so while, you know, we had plans of developing the next call center platform, the one that I work on that's like a decade old, we're now in the planning stages of building that and thinking about, you know, what that looks like, and the money is just simply not there. The other piece to that is, you know, we don't travel very much. We've gone, you know, since the pandemic and everybody's gone remote, we've become very adept at working remotely. And so there's a lot less travel and there's a lot less face to face with people. And I
Yes.
think that's difficult. It's difficult to lead a team when somebody on your team, you haven't physically been in the same room with them for 2 years. That, you know, that's difficult. It's not impossible, it's not, but it's a pain in the butt, to go back to your question.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's lean into that.
Okay.
Pros and cons. We all work from home now.
hmm
What do you see? Where do you see that in 5 years? What do you miss? What is it? What has it opened your life up to?
So lucky for me, I've been a full-time telecommuter for a decade.
Excellent.
So when the pandemic came, for me personally, it was business as usual. But what I have noticed, one of the things I do miss is when you're working a problem, like the issue we had last night. We mentioned a circuit outage, and we were working some stuff. There was an issue yesterday. We were talking about some network traces and looking at the network communications between different devices and how that communicates. I miss being able to go into a conference room with two or three other engineers and literally whiteboard it out. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, this is this, and then they can come over and they can erase lines and they can draw lines. You can do that virtually, but if you're not used to that, it can also be difficult. And some people are not really good at drawing with their mouse.
What I'll say, and I was actually doing my internship when we got the call. Everybody go home. There's this new disease. Everybody go away. So I've never experienced the joy of like the mattress and the pizzas and everybody just cramming into different control rooms.
Mhm.
What would you tell someone like me who's entering the field from their one bedroom apartment, who perhaps kind of missed being on the old guard, and it doesn't seem like it's exactly coming back in the same way.
Right. Um, So let me ask you to rephrase the question. To what would I tell them in regards to working from home or
Um, Entering IT healthcare today, post
entering IT?
pandemic, with the state of technology as it currently is.
Um, well, again, I work in the contact center, so it's all, you know, a lot of, you know, the technology intent is to support personal connections,
Yes.
whether it's through a chat, a video visit, a phone call, it doesn't matter. My job is to get two people connecting and working on whatever the issue is, whether it's making an appointment or a clinical appointment, doesn't matter. So what I would tell an IT person coming into healthcare today is remember the personal connections, because it's when you were in the office, you know, hey, let's go to lunch, you and me, you know, and then you go to lunch and you can kind of talk about what's going on. You can get that personal connection. You don't get that when you're remote, right? You don't get that 2 minutes, 5 minutes over the water cooler anymore. And there isn't a real good, in my experience, there's not a good virtual substitute for that.
No, absolutely. Time flies when you're having fun. We're at minute 28 of a 30-minute program. Would you like to say in our grand finale? Anything that we've missed? Um,
Um, yeah, so two things, kind of dovetailing off what I just said. It doesn't matter if you're in IT or where you are, but especially in IT because you deal with a lot of engineer-minded people. Um, Remember the personal connections. People that you help, that trust you, will back you up when you need them. I recently saw a video. Basically, what they said was it comes down to two things which really resonated with me. One is people want to know that their work matters, that what they're doing is important. And then also, people want to know that they are important. And so, as a leader, if you can instill in your people a feeling that they're valued by you, that they are important to you and the organization, and that the work they're doing is important to, in our case, our membership, the people who need medical assistance. If you can get that through, then everything else becomes easy. Then you understand why you're there and why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, you have been Aubrey Ford in Georgia. Thank you so much for making time for us today. I am Christian Patillo. This has been When IT Hits the Fan, brought to you by Rhyno Healthcare Services Solutions. Rhyno Healthcare Solutions. I'm gonna get fired from my job. See you next episode.
Thank you.